to the people they're advising, but also their own. Tackling gateways and delays in the approval process by identifying information blockers. So I'd like you all to participate in this. What do you think? Does that cover it? What else would you like to add to that list? Matt?
I would say there needs to be an inclusion or certainly mention of management of design risk as well, specifically relating to achieving the design intent of any.
Okay. Yeah.
And the reason I mention that is that the common assumption would tend to be, for me stating that would be helping consultants manage the acquisition of that risk. But I disagree with that. The number of times we are asked to, or it's assumed that we are effectively buying up the design risk of the principal designer. So therefore, it's then up to me, and this is hypothetically, it's not, but it's assumed that it's up to me or my organization to prove and confirm your design intent as the principal designer, and that's simply not the case. We can provide advice, we can provide opinion, we can provide substantiating evidence to support sort of certain design intent, certain design arrangements, but if the test information does not exist to prove it, or if the testing standards don't exist to be able to provide proof of compliance of the design intent, all we can do is say that is the best solution we're able to provide. It's then up to you as a principal designer, not you specifically, Richard, but the architect or the main contractor or whoever the principal designer might be under CDM. It's up to you to decide whether you're happy with that, or whether you want to revert to a much simpler arrangement and completely redesign that area of the building or the entire building entirely to align with arrangements that can be tested.
So, right, Patrick, can I bring you in on that? Well, what's your feeling on that as an architect?
The correct management of design risk starts at the beginning. So if a design is partially completed or in the architect's sort of thinking complete, and it throws up unmanageable design risks or difficult to manage design risks, then they haven't done the job properly. I would assume that whether it's under CDM, I mean, there are complex circumstances where this might not apply, but where it's under CDM or under the BSA, the lead designer is also the principal designer. And if somebody else is able to point out that they haven't managed the design risks until partially down, that they've obviously not started at the beginning and considered the consequences of every line that they've drawn. It shouldn't be getting to the point of an it's part of a design team collaboration, and if there is, I'm not quite sure what Matt's business is. We haven't in fact met yet. So whatever, if a client needs Matt to come in and say, actually, this is a cockeyed design because there are areas that can't be tested for, or where the risk cannot be properly assessed, then actually that represents a very serious slap back on the rest of the design team, and indeed on the client, for not having managed the collaboration process that includes that sort of cyclical, iterative feedback from the beginning.
Absolutely. So
I
are
don't know
you,
whether I mean, I'd be really keen. I don't mind if somebody else can demonstrate that I'm wrong, but I mean, you know, that's
so,
I
do,
say it's
so
from bitter experience. I've barged ahead and done things in the past, and then found that it does. You know, you can come up with any brilliant design, but if you can't hold it up, quite apart from the design risks, but if it's structurally challenging or impossible, well, then the design is hopeless. It's got to be buildable, and it's got to be buildable safely.
So are you saying that we don't need to check on that, or are you agreeing with Matt that we do?
You do need to check on it, but you shouldn't need to check on it.
You
Because
shouldn't
it should
need
have
to
been
check on it.
the checking on it is done right. That is part of the design process.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I mean, we aren't, because we know things now. It's not the same thing as you know, building the Rotherhithe Tunnel in the 1810 or whatever, whenever Brunel built it. You know, where the or rather, or only say the, you know, the Grand Union Canal, the Regent's Canal, where actually, you know, everyone was relatively careless about the fate of the Irish labourer running up, you know, wheelbarrows up 30-foot ramps and falling off the edge of them.
Okay, so that. Sorry, Patrick.
Go on. Anyway, that's fine.
Okay, so right, so we'll add that in. So just make a note of that. So we have another cause. Anybody else think there's something else we should add in there? I'm sorry, I don't know what you all do. I know there's some new people on here. So if you speak, just say briefly who you are, very, very briefly. Anybody else? Gareth, what do you think?
Well, I'm with Patrick. Everything should be agreed up front. There's no harm in checking the checker. Sorry, going back to your point, Richard. I'm Gareth. I'm technical director for Clough-Banks. Yes, there's no harm in checking the checker. That's the whole point of what was the principal designer role, and now has obviously been extended to principal designer for fire or Part B. Everybody's overlooking what's being suggested, and I mean this in the nicest possible way, Patrick, but architects have the most fancy ideas, and sometimes bringing it to fruition, science won't allow it. So that's why the design team as a whole has an input. That won't work because of this, or we can't make it work under ADB. So if we apply BS 9991 or 9999, it'll work, but it still needs to look like this. So yeah, I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel, but there is always a need for checking the checker.
Okay, that's cool. And is there anything else you think we should put on our list, Gareth, in terms of things that we should be aiming to do?
Let me give it some thought. There's nothing that springs to mind at this moment in time.
Okay, let me just read it out again. Right, so it's supporting competence and information management, addressing liability concerns and helping consultants manage risk, including their own, tackling gateways and delays in the approval process by identifying information blockers. Bex, let me come to you. Is there anything you think we should be including in that?
Well, as you know, I mainly work on post-occupancy side of things. So I would say that element, so the Building Safety Act requirements in terms of golden thread and building safety case reports and things like that, and best practice in terms of that side of things. So you've mainly been talking about construction and the gateways, which is very relevant, but also so is the post-occupancy side of things.
Very much so. Absolutely, very much so. So anything specific you want to put on the list with that, Bex?
I mean, it's just good to talk to people on what we've found is best practice, especially now that the building assessment certificates have been issued for successful applications. So what people's experience with that is, and just sharing best practice, because there's not a lot of conversations that I've been involved with for the post-occupancy successful applications yet. So that would be really handy.
Okay, that's cool. Cyprian, what about you? Have you got something you think we should be looking at to do within this group moving forward?
Well, the thing is, I'm Cyprian Twickin, and I work as a building design and compliance consultant slash we call it executing the BRPD role at Frankham. So my comment on this is basically, from my experience, I'm finding out at the moment we're not getting the basic right at the moment. So to be adding things to it, I think it would be a bit at this stage more just more onerous. The thing is, consultants, whether it be designers, whether it be our clients, are not getting the basic right at present. They're not getting their basic duties, knowing, explaining. I think what we need to be doing at the moment is actually trying to get them to understand, what's required at this stage. That's my view at this moment. We need to understand what is to be done now, and I'm finding out struggling in projects where people are even arguing, you try to put up an argument they don't need to. So it's about getting everybody on board right now to say yes.
So we as consultants, you're saying the first thing we need to do is communicate the requirements and the needs, so that we can get our clients and their workforce or other consultants on board. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying.
Okay, fair enough. I think that's certainly very valid. Gareth, you got your hand up.
Yes, sorry, it was to add another point is the items, lessons learned, that we have to share lessons learned through all of the process, good and bad, and also share any best practices or any innovation. So any innovation that makes things simpler. Legislation is very complex, and that's why we find ourselves in this muddle where so much has been thrown at the industry. Everybody's trying to interpret it. And, when you assume, if you pardon the expression, it makes an ass out of you and me. So communication's got to be right the first thing we're doing, clear and concise, best practice, lessons learned, things like that.
Absolutely. I think also, actually, we as consultants, we have an obligation to make sure we're right up to speed on anything that affects our specialism, which is not always the case, I've found. No,
absolutely. And sometimes that's more of a business model, Richard, where people are holding on to information because, you're the gatekeeper then and it generates revenue. Whereas I think about things differently. We've got an onboarding process that's soon to start with clients. And for instance, if a client engages with us for a gateway 2 to 3 process, they will receive a CPD, them and their team, on what's expected to get through the gateway process. So the size of drawings, what information is required, etc., so that when they leave our experience, they can take it into the next scheme. It's not about me being on the next scheme. I want everybody to be up to speed and to almost be self-reliant. And that's kind of talking consultants out of a job, but we've all got a duty of care to make sure the built environment lasts beyond our legacy.
Well, I think what you're saying, or touching on, is something that I think is really important, and that's we need to be very clear and know our own processes. We have to have put processes in place that are repeatable and scalable. For the way we operate and the way we're going to operate with clients. It's not a question, it's not seat of the pants. It's not seat of the pants thing. Okay.
Richard, sorry. I'm just apologising because I'm travelling down to Digital Construction Week, so I'm sorry that I'm not fully engaged in the project, but I've been listening to everything. I just wanted to reinforce something that Gareth just said there, and it ties back to what we're trying to do with the Golden Thread Task Force, and that is that the recommendations that Gareth would give to his clients will filter through to their supply chain. Now, that supply chain will also be working for other clients who will also have consultants who will also be advising them on what needs to be done. And I think it's really important that we try and align what those requirements are, because otherwise the supply chain will get mixed messages in terms of what's expected of them, and they will get it wrong. So we raised this in the development group meeting last week, and all of the development group said that they would be keen to standardize what they were putting into their EIRs and their requirements. So Gareth, I think that would be a really good thing for us to look at as far as the task force is concerned, so that we've got a standardized set of information requirements that we can then work through. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I know you and I follow each other on LinkedIn, George, and those who follow me on LinkedIn, I put out probably monthly simplifying guides to different processes that break down legislation into language people can understand. And so, yeah, I'm total agreement.
Okay, Olayemi. I'm sorry if I don't know how to pronounce your name. I apologise.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you. Yeah, just Olayemi.
Olayemi, sorry.
Yeah, working with Townsend as Olive Cost and Carbon consultant. So one thing I would just want to add as what we need to do as a group, as a consultancy, is we shouldn't just think about, we should help clients not just think about the initial benefits, but the long-term goals. Because once I've understand working with people is that they just want the initial gratifications. So if we're adding to our roles, the group tasks like, okay, helping clients understand the long-term benefits of applying a particular private technologies or a particular standard on a project, it's going to help them more when thinking on a throughout the project life cycle. And in addition to what Spirit said, is about understanding the why of what the group is all about, what consultancies wants to offer. So I understand that when you talk about consultancy, it's a very, very broad terms which involve a lot of things. So instead of us looking at different things at the same time, so I would just suggest we should just take things in bits and we can expand from there. So for the first question is we understand the why and the first challenges we want to actually tackle as a group. That's one thing I would suggest, because consultancy might be simple and complex in the same instance if we don't manage it very well. So that's my own advice I would just want to give.
Yeah.
In addition to the group.
No, we're certainly all on the same page in terms of the need for better communication from us, aren't we? Pam. You're on mute if you're talking. Okay, we'll assume that's a coffee break. Right, okay, so we've got some interesting additions to our original list. If anybody thinks of anything afterwards, bung us an email or message us on LinkedIn or something, and we can add to that. Now, George mentioned the Golden Thread Task Force, which some of you will have heard of and some of you won't. which is very germane to our discussion about certainly on the communications side of things. George, are you there? Are you able to give a run through on the Golden Thread Task Force?
Yeah, I'm going into bad signal areas, so I may lose you in a minute. But the principle is that what we're trying to do is standardise as far as possible what information is being requested from people, as Gareth was saying earlier. But more importantly, produce a standardised method of auditing what's being provided so that we can give a health check to clients and construction teams as to whether the information that they are getting and maybe will be presenting to the regulator or to building control is going to be adequate. And if we can standardize that, at least at a basic level, we've been concentrating on fire safety on the basis that if they can't get the fire safety bit right, with all the effort that's been put into that, then the likelihood is that there's a lot more, the more complex things aren't going to go very well either. So we produced a video on Saturday, which Richard can send you a link to, which explains what the Golden Thread Task Force is doing. Some of you, like Bex and Gareth, are already involved in it. But if you could spread the word on that, that would be good. And the principal idea is that we're going to be able to give to projects or clients or organisations a sort of an assessment to say that they're aware of the Golden Thread and they understand the principles of what the Golden Thread is trying to achieve. Now, if we can do that, then it means that we can start to raise the standards of what people are doing and also start to influence senior management. The one last thing I would say is that we did a survey, which again, Richard can share with you, at the meeting a couple of weeks ago, in terms of the state of the industry, in terms of information that is expected. And importantly, whether senior management actually understand and appreciate their duties under the new regulations. And when you take a look at it, I think you'll find it's quite shocking. Not surprising, but quite...
Right, I think George has cut out, but I think he cut...
They're actually a fact.
Okay, great. So that's in a nutshell roughly what we're doing with the Golden Thread Task Force, and I will share a video link when I can find it. Anybody got any questions or comments on that as an idea, a methodology, a tool?
If you don't mind, am I allowed to share in the group, Richard? Is it set up to share?
Yes, you may certainly do that, Gareth.
I've got a number of publications that I wrote that I can share with the group. One is Simplifying PAS 1192, which is surrounding the Golden Thread. It simplifies and breaks down that in language that everybody can understand, hopefully. I've also wrote another publication, which is Leveraging Change Management to Better Your Golden Thread. So I've got lots of publications I've put together that I can share with the group. As I say, my intent is if everybody, and George's intent, if everybody's singing from the same hymn sheet and delivers the same, then we can weed out the problems that we're faced with every day and take away the fact that people are afraid to build because they are unsure of how to get through the gateways. We obviously, we need building to keep going, else all of us on this call won't be doing anything in 12 months' time. So I'll drop them into the chat if that's okay with you, Richard.
Do that. That's fantastic. We're always happy to have other people's work. Anybody else? Anybody else got any comments on the Golden Thread Task Force? Okay, let's see what else we've got to go through.
Good. Can you hear me again?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So just one little point. The idea of the task force is also to enable people like the group here to be able to work collaboratively on fee-earning work, to be able to advise people, but be able to draw on people with different expertise. So Matt Taylor, for example, is a real expert in partitioning and ceilings and things like that. And therefore, the fabric side of things, he can provide a lot of practical experience to anybody that needs that level of experience. And we've got other people on the call who will have diverse experience. So therefore, the intention with this is that we're creating within the task force a community of people who can provide absolute expert guidance to clients and contractors. Because the challenge that contractors have got at the moment, main contractors, is that actually what they're doing is they're taking information from many dozens of different specialists, and they're then trying to pull that together into something that's coherent. And unless they can get that in an aligned way, then their golden thread is going to be broken. So, I mean, Matt's got examples of that. The other thing I would say, if I've still got a signal, is the point Patrick's made right at the beginning, I think is very sound. The challenge is that the procurement process means there's normally a complete disconnect between who designed the building and then who's delivering it. And we're not going to change design and build in, even if we want to, in short order. So therefore, we need to recognise that procurement methods at the moment are breaking those golden thread connections and also the design responsibilities. So we need to figure out how we can have that, maybe the DNA of the information management being able to run through from design into design and construction, into construction, and then into asset management. And that's really what the golden thread's about.
Okay. So we've got a list of excuse me of things of aims of the group. So what do we do next? What's the first steps? Do we break each of those? Do we take one of those individually and break it all down? How should we address it? Cyprian, I said, was talking about I think, talking about starting at the beginning and breaking it down into manageable bits. Does that make sense? Is that what we should do with our aims? What's our methodology?
I think we need some sort of clear definition to it, Richard. So as in sort of key points that we're aiming to achieve through this. So just my view on it, but if we've got an overall outcome, what are the key points that we're hoping for? So like I say, we might have sort of understanding of the information requirement to meet gateways, where sort of consultant advice is brought in. That's an ongoing concern for us at the moment. I spoke at London Build not that long ago, and the input, I was on a panel, the input from all parties was we need specialist trade consultant advice involved earlier. And even we had an architect from one of the larger practices involved, and she has stated, there is benefit to having it involved earlier, but the architectural budget just doesn't allow for it. So we're sort of, everyone involved is saying the same thing, but the changes aren't necessarily happening that need to happen to be able to build more efficiently. So
well, to some extent, that I mean, that's the role of a consultant in many cases. is actually to help the client save money or do things more efficiently. So the two aren't, having a consultant on board earlier is not necessarily not mutually exclusive from watching budgets, is it?
Absolutely. No, I mean,
Yeah.
every more or less every project that certainly that we're involved in, you look at where the point where we're involved, and normally at a point in the project where it's been acknowledged that the design information is wrong and inachievable and incorrect to a point that it's now resulting in project delays, additional costs, sort of quite severe measures. And you look at that and you think, well, had we been involved 12 months earlier, all of that would have been avoided. But it's, you never get somebody in to fix something before you know it's broken.
Yeah, well, that's part of the communication thing, isn't it? Again, that's part of our communication. And I'm not saying I know the answer to it, but it's part of the communication. I think that's an age-old issue for consultants, isn't it? Patrick.
Just drawing on Matt's comments. If you have if you're running on design and build, and there is a reluctance on the part of the client to engage specialists at the right point for efficient execution, seamless, linear progression of a design, then I mean I can see it's I'm a bit rusty on D&B now, but I mean it's because it's a long time since I've done anything. But what we need to be able to demonstrate through, say, Matt's experience, is how much the redesign costs in practical terms and in time delays for the failure to engage the right people at the right time. Now, that does turn part of D&B upside down, because you're going to have to engage in a procurement process long before the design is finalized. And in fact, this is an issue that comes up even in traditional procurement, where the assumption is that the architect and other members of the consultant design team know exactly what they want and how to achieve it. But they aren't the people doing the building. And whoever is going to execute the project probably has an alternative way, certainly thinks they've got a more economic way, but it's very often, once something is on site, to determine whether that's a genuine circumstance or merely a commercial decision on the part of the contractor. So by drawing people in at the beginning, the people who are going to build it in some form, whichever part of it, or design specialist installations much earlier on, is definitely financially advantageous, but it adds risk, financial risk, if the project doesn't proceed.
Right. Yes.
So, you know, and that's the reason. Last night I sat in a community meeting of a bunch of residents down here in Wiltshire, with everybody agonising about an application for a permission in principle, which is a concept that is fairly new for me. But the bit that was missed out of that conversation is that the risk of bringing forward a small scheme, the risk of bringing forward a larger scheme for new housing, can be £50,000 for a small builder, and that's too much for them to take the risk on. Now, scale it up, and the risks are the same. The cash is greater.
Yeah.
But who wants to fork out that level of money when you haven't even purchased the site and you have no idea whether you're ever going to get consent? So perhaps the task that we should be trying to achieve is an approach that where it's not possible to hide the fact that the risk exists, or that you haven't considered the risk. So, I mean, I can see there's a lot of there's a tendency for financial pressures to be put on consultant teams to deliver more at a lower cost initially because of the risk to a client, and therefore inevitably for corners to be cut. The principal one is the recording of what you haven't done, and where you and spending the time to. And I'm sure there are lots of architects who would argue with me really vociferously that I would completely misunderstand it, that they never make this mistake. But that is just the reality of life.
Okay. So Bex, what about you?
Yeah, can I?
Sorry, go on.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Richard, the thing we need to draw back to is that what we're looking at here is the information management side of things. That's what basically BIM4Housing is about. It's about the information management, and I absolutely agree with what Patrick's just said there. But we should keep focused on what information is needed. What's the minimum level of information that can be provided to support certain activities, and if we can standardize more of that, then the cost of producing those initial information sets should be reduced. I would have thought, Patrick.
Well, it certainly should be more predictable. So if you can devise cost certainty in delivering that information level, then at least the participants understand their position better, I think is the answer. And that, so if you can't identify what the commercial risks are, then you tend to say, well, we're not going to do it. We'll leave that. We'll kick that one down the road and deal with it when we have to deal with it, when we know that we can deliver a project. Or sorry, we got a project to deliver.
So if that's the case, what we should perhaps be doing is looking at where we can really leverage some real value for clients, and that's probably at Gateway 2 and Gateway 3, and then, as Bex is saying, then on into the rest of it. The challenge that you're saying there on the earliest stage, which I absolutely agree, that's where the golden thread should start, is that there's so much uncertainty in that area that probably there's not that much that we can contribute, but there's a lot we can contribute down the line.
Yes.
Certainly down the line, but I think if you're generating a standardized set of information requirements, if not money, but certainly risk can be attached to each item. And from all the people that I've witnessed in your BIM4Housing and BIM4Information Management working groups, all seem to say the same message, although they have their particular agendas in advocating a position. We need to collaborate on that. Sorry, that was more than that's the thing.
No, I agree. I think the information requirements side of things and the asset information requirements is something that we can do a lot to standardize. And in fact, actually, I think we have done quite a lot to standardize, but we can build on that. I absolutely agree with you, Patrick.
Gareth.
Sorry, I just wanted to add one of my thoughts on this, and I think, and I certainly practice it myself, is a standardizer risk gap analysis against the project. That will declare to everybody, the client as well, the money men, this is what will happen if you don't engage up front with this entity, etc., etc. This information is required. Without it, this is the knock-on effect. Everybody wants honesty, but nobody wants to hear the truth. And when it comes to commercial aspects, you've got to pave the way and say, up front, you was advised that this information was required. You've done nothing about it. This is now the outcome. So if it's sat in delay in the gateway, it's because of this. What we need to do is we need to influence behaviours. And I think having a standardised risk gap analysis when we engage with anybody is possibly one of the ways to better that standardisation. I don't know what everybody else thinks.
Anybody on that?
I guess
okay.
Sorry. Yeah, I would have thought. I mean, Gareth's suggestion, is if we do it and we find that nobody pays any attention to it and they carry on doing what they've done for the last 150 years, then at least we've tried. But certainly moving along and it's consistent with what George has been saying as well. Is we have a standardized risk assessment, and it really, after all, should be a technological solution readily available. We're not. Everybody does a risk assessment in everything that they do every day, and we should be ready to acknowledge the residual risks.
Yeah, exactly that, Patrick. It doesn't need to be arduous. It doesn't need to be complex. You're feeding in into the metrics what's required. And yeah, it's that age-old adage, you can lead a horse to water, you can't make it drink. But we've got to reinforce the behaviours. If we want change throughout the industry and we're going to help influence that, then the basics of what we've got to teach people. If you don't do this, this is the knock-on effect. It's HSG 68, plan, do, check, act. These are the basics that people are forgetting, with every risk assessment that you do, whether it be to stop a hazard or whether it's to stop losing money. Apply the same metrics and you should be able to control the outcome better.
Okay. Right. So what I suggest is on that at the end after the meeting anyway, as you probably all know, you get a high point notes and a link to a video of the meeting. What we'll also get out to you is the updated list of our aims, which I'm suggesting we then dissect one by one into more bite-sized pieces. We, as in the group, and then start knocking them off. Would that make sense? Does anybody disagree with that or have a better idea?
That makes sense, Richard.
Yeah. We've started. Debbie Carlton actually leads this group, or is one of the leaders of this group, but she's not been able to come today, which is hence I'm sitting here talking not very informedly about anything. But she's actually started. We started in the pre-meeting, breaking down the competency side of things because that's her speciality. For the competency side of what we're looking to do, the primary focus is on the competency of individuals providing information, particularly, but not only, in light of new regulatory requirements. There's concern about the confusion between CPD and actual competence. We've identified that, and what can we do about it? And again, lack of standardized frameworks across institutions and disciplines, for example, balconies, information management, is also an issue in terms of competence. The current guidance and assessment, particularly from John Vanson's group, were considered to be a bit vague and diluted. Has anybody got any experience in that? Anything you'd want to say on that in terms of the competency of yourselves or the people you're dealing with? I think that's the point, isn't it? Bex. Competency.
Sorry, I've just come off another phone call. Could you?
We're talking about competency, Bex.
Yeah.
It's one of the main things that we're going to cover. We were just saying that the best way of doing the headlines of what we're going to cover and be looking at over the next months within the group is to break it down into bite-sized chunks that we can actually get a head around. That we've already done that. So, Debbie Carden's already done that with competency to some extent. The competency of individuals providing information is a particular focus. Somehow covering the confusion between CPD and actual competence. Lack of standardized frameworks for assessing competence and disciplines, and the vague guidance that seems to be coming out even from reputable organizations. Does that affect you in any way? Has it affected you in any way in terms of the competence of the consultants that you've used, or indeed yourself?
Well, it's as we all know, it's all a fairly new regime. I know that people in my line of work have the CIB level 6 in building safety management, which kind of gives you that's the baseline, really, what we look at. And I know there's a competency paper that the government put out as well, and there is broad guidelines, but it's about being able to reach out to other people in my industry who are competent in specific things. For example, structural engineers, fire engineers, that side of things, and they're quite well represented in sort of, if they're chartered, there's quite a with those specific items. And I think as we go along, the building safety aspect, it'll be clear what you need and how to provide competency, but there's not really a set thing at the moment.
But within that particular competency, it's good if it's all standardized, isn't it? Otherwise, how do you compare?
Absolutely.
So you said CIB, is it CIOB 6 or something?
Yeah, so they've got I think it's either a year and a half course, level 6 in building safety management, which combines fire safety and building safety. So it's quite in depth, and it just teaches us what we look for and in terms of post occupancy.
Yeah. Now Debbie would say that training doesn't equal competence.
Absolutely, and that's the tricky thing that we're dealing with. So luckily I've got years of experience, as many years of experience as you can probably get in this. And the problem is, it's just not there, the experience, because it's such a new thing, and if you're just coming out of that qualification. So it's all about training and upskilling is what I see this as. Teaching and upskilling people who are in comparative roles. So you've got CDM people who can probably move into building safety. You've got structural engineers, you've got fire. There's a lot of things that can move into it, but it is very much, you do need the experience and you do need to upskill because it's just not there.
So those qualifications that you're speaking about are a guide rather than a be all and end all.
They're crucial because they'll show you what you need to do.
Absolutely.
But absolutely, experience, nothing can really compare to experience, but it's so new that so it's all about training and upskilling, I think.
That's interesting. That's very interesting. Anybody else on that? This is quite important stuff, isn't it? Pav, have you got something on that?
Not really at the moment. Okay.
Cyprian. Sorry, Gareth, I'll come back to you.
Yes.
Cyprian.
Yes. with regards to competency, what I'm finding is that, and I heard somebody just you just said to it with the difference between the CPD. Let's start with the what is competence first. So, if CPDs can be classified as competence, and the CPD would be part of that. I'm finding that different designers are finding it's really hard to lay out and demonstrate their competencies in line with the PAS 8670, or which has now turned to BS 8670, and also the PAS document for the PD and the PC. The thing is, while the information is there, it's not set out properly within the PAS documents. So, you might get a CV, from somebody who has been in the industry for doing this particular skill for like 20 years, whether say it's a fire engineer, and they send you a CV and say, this is my competence, but the CV does not covers the elements or the areas that are supposed to highlight the competencies with regards to regulation, the regulatory competency, the margin, the works on the HRB or what have you. So I think, looking forward, to begin with, I feel that we could come up with something, a structured document or a structured process that shows, help or assist all these competencies can be demonstrated in line with the PAS 8671 and 8673. With regards to the confusion between CPD and competencies, there's always this tendency to conflate the CPD with competence and what have you, but training, continuous training, and education, and you call it updating, forms part of that knowledge and that skill that will come in the competency. So when you say CPD, can I ask for you to be more specific when you say is CPD classed as competency? Are you saying if a CPD alone or just of people ongoing CPDs can be classed when you say that?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. See, for me, CPD, you can get, you can cover, you can count as CPD if you attend a webinar, if the webinar is accredited, but it doesn't mean you've learned anything.
Yeah. Precisely.
Yeah, I mean, in and of itself, it's obviously. I mean, obviously, as an idea, continual professional development is something that obviously is very valuable. But I'm not sure it's always very measurable.
Well, the thing is, for me, CPD is about ongoing learning. But then competency should be about showing we can apply knowledge and skill
Exactly,
in real-world situation.
Absolutely. It's applying it, isn't it?
As you said, you might do a series of CPDs, and that is you might not come out with nothing that you can apply to a project, but then you might do a few CPDs that are project specific, on that. And the regulation also states that learning, whether it be educational wise learning or training or from work experience, could be counted as competency. But it's, as you say, how will we measure it, and how would we? Yeah, it's how it will be measured.
No, absolutely. Well, this is what we're hoping to identify, aren't we? In some way, Gareth.
So what I do is something that I learned from my time in the military. In the Navy, we were given what's called task books, and those task books basically covered CPD, what you'd learned, how you demonstrate what you learned. So what I'm advising my my staff is to start to use a task book. So physical training, so we're talking about CIOB level 6 or whatever it may be, and then demonstrating any CPDs linked to that, and also what you've applied and what you've learned. So you're demonstrating that you understand and that you're confident that you can give the information across. That's why it's left vague, because if it ever went to court, you would be on the stand and you would be grilled. Well, what makes you an expert? Nobody's an expert. Every day's a school day as far as anybody should be concerned. You have to learn every single day. You demonstrate the behaviors and the knowledge to be able to deliver what it is you're selling or talking to people about. So my advice is always keep a task book, and within that task book, reference any projects that you've been associated with and what your role on that project was. I've got a master's degree in construction law and resolution, or should I say conflict resolution against contracts. I don't practice that every day. Doesn't make me competent as being an expert witness or being an adjudicator. It's only if I then expand upon that I can then demonstrate that I'm putting that master's degree to good use. So it's got to be a fine blend. Having an MVQ level 12 or whatever it may be doesn't make you competent. A bricklayer who's been laying bricks for 30 years is now being asked to do an MVQ level 5 so he or she can work on a construction site.
Yeah.
They've forgotten more than what the MVQ assessors actually doing. So I think in reintroducing to the industry a task book of sorts will help this whole argument around competency, etc., etc.
That's interesting, actually, isn't it? It's an interesting idea. Matt?
I was going to say, Richard, I don't think it's wise to rely on a CPD as a particularly prominent part of a competency assessment. The reason being, even I was performing dry lining product CPDs 20 years ago, I suppose. Now, even then, when they were in person, you still have people in the back of the room who were technically asleep. Were they learning anything? Probably not. Now, I suspect a lot of them are done over Teams. People who are sort of at home, disappearing off. I question whether they're present most of the time and sort of down for CPD hours. I'm a big fan of sort of employing a SCEB arrangement, and I think the whole behaviour section of that is very underemphasised, and it's something that we really place quite a lot of emphasis on, to be honest. If people don't know, if there's something that they don't know, like Gareth has pointed out there, you go through life not knowing various bits and pieces. You're always learning. It's not the not knowing necessarily that makes somebody incompetent, but it's having the ability to appreciate that you don't know and knowing where to find that information, what to look for, not making the assumptions, and actually trying to go out and educate yourself so that you are then able to provide a competent response. It is ever going to be a question: how do we provide evidence of competency? And I think a lot of that is, well, like I say, it's through skills, through training, but there's a large amount of that is the behavioural side of it as well.
Of course it is. You've got to be able to apply it, haven't you? I'm going to go to Pav next. I'll come back to you, Cyprian. It's just we haven't heard from Pav yet. Pav.
No problem.
Sorry, it is Pav that you want to speak to. Brilliant. Can I just say that I support the behaviour aspects that you've been talking about? My request is to bring in mentoring and supervision in addition to what we're talking about, because that's what these groups are. These groups allow us to actually be mentored, but the key aspect that we have to, in order to change your behaviour and actually learn, we need to write down the projects that we're on and what we're learning from those projects, both positive and negative. What were the lessons learned? So we used to do this whilst going through chartership or whatever, but we need that in addition to training and competency that you're talking about here, the capability needs to be evaluated. The person that needs to evaluate your capability is one, your organization that you're actually working for. They have a duty of care because vicariously they're responsible for your acts and omissions. But then on a personal, professional level, your professional memberships also need you to actually have a network of supervisors and network of people that you can approach to say, look, this piece of work has led to the top part of my actual experience. Will you supervise my work? And this forum allows that sort of open environment that we can sort of say, look, I haven't done this sort of work before. What do you think? And that way, in front of a judge, we can say, we've gone to industry. This is an equivalent person of my experience doing the same job. And this is what they would do. So we can test whether we're in the right sort of circle and frame of work. I hope that adds.
No, that's absolutely spot on. And you brought something up, actually, that we spoke briefly earlier on about the Golden Thread task force we've set up. Part of that, which we've not gone into just briefly today, excuse me, part of that is a mentoring operation. So, Pav, what you're saying, I hear you. And we're looking to hopefully, in a small way, get some of that covered. Cyprian.
Yes, during the COVID shutdown, I sat in front of the television and I've always listened to this update that they give every 2 days or every 3 days or a few, and there was something that I found really intriguing, and I've used it and applied it to this old competence, and it goes back to exactly what Gareth, Matt, and Pav is actually saying with regards to behavior. This is what I'm going to read out something. It's really short. This is what the minister said. The job of the minister was not to be a subject matter expert. Of course, you need to get to grips with the subject matter, but that is only half the job. There's a lot of transferable skills handling parliament, communicating with the public, taking decisions effectively, and then you have the subject matter experts who advise you on it all. Nobody is a specialist. Nobody is a specialist in the whole health service. Literally nobody. Even the chief executive of the health service. And this is I've used this since I've started delivering the role as the BRPD and advisory under the BSA and the Part 2A. Is that if I don't, I believe that I'm competent. I'm aware of the legislation. In some areas, I'm an expert in that area. In some area, I can grade myself and say, look, I've understanding, a working knowledge or deep understanding knowledge. But the thing is, at what point do you become competent? I think I become competent is where I've never done this before. I'm aware of it, but I'm not an expert in it. And within the organization, I ensure that somebody's appointed on that project, fee-wise, to ensure that I can go back to get that expert knowledge to fully deliver my role. So I'll just share that to see, using this as an approach and see how we could move forward, in developing, something, a stream as a forward streaming on the whole process.
No, that's really good. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, certainly the competency bit we've got to sort out or put something together on is going to be quite interesting, to put it mildly, isn't it? And challenging. Anybody else? Anybody else got anything on anything we've said, actually?
I would say,
I
Richard.
think.
Oh, sorry, back's gone.
Mine's just a very basic thing. I think I'll just pop this in the chat. It's about being aware of where your knowledge ends and seeking advice from then. And that's really what competency is knowing your limits and knowing where and how to get that advice. And yeah.
Yeah, knowledge is not always external, is it? It's internal as well.
What it is, Bex, it's being aware of your own ego. And that's what a lot of people are not aware of.
Absolutely.
I wouldn't know anything about that.
Spoken like a true egotistical.
Sorry.
One thing I would say,
like a true egotistical person.
What? Matt, were you going to speak?
Yeah, sorry. So basically, one thing I was just going to mention was, in terms of sort of increasing knowledge and really sort of gaining the information to provide organisations with more people who are competent in various areas of construction. We've got there are a whole host of independent trade specialists, consultants out there. You know, I can only speak about my own sector in any particular depths, but you know, there are M&E consultants and joinery consultants and all manner of consultants for different works packages. I would certainly in my own area of the industry, which is dry lining and internal fit out and the passive fire protection, most of our work is resolving project related problems. Very little of it is actually related to training and enhancement within the industry. It's we work with our advisory body and we do a lot to try and get out there and enhance knowledge. But the actual call and the actual pull from organisations is relatively low. You know, I can guarantee that probably at least far more than 50% of people involved in any construction project aren't aware of even what the function of a deflection head detail in a petition is for. It's a fairly simple explanation, but it's just not one that people are aware of. Now that's a 2-minute conversation with somebody who knows, and they can just save a whole lot of time and bother. If we can, as an industry, call on pulling on organizations to enhance and increase knowledge, then that's surely beneficial. But at the moment, I don't believe we're doing that nearly as much.
Well, in terms of we're not doing it or they're not doing it.
Well, I can just consider myself to be in the same. We're constantly looking for improvements even within our own organisation. But as an industry, we're not. The individual parts of that industry are very focused on firefighting. Certainly from sort of my perspective, are very focused on firefighting the problems and specifically related to the projects, rather than preventing those problems in the first place. So are we putting enough emphasis into increasing knowledge right from the point of origin? If we used to a great company that I was with previously, a specialist trade contractor, used to they had their own facility where they used to run dry lining workshops. It was a practical arrangement to get people in to build a section of wall. And they'd have the tier 1 contractors would tend to sort of high level team in of, the sort of board members, etc. They'd have every now and then you'd have an architect or somebody like that. But it was people who were involved with projects. And just having that sort of half day practical was massively beneficial to them in understanding some of the challenges.
So, what you were saying just now, so you think that the trade organisations, for want of a better word, should take a bigger hand in this?
I would say I'm not. I'd have to think about how it would be implemented a bit more, Richard. I mean, it's one that's open for discussion, I think. But how do we encourage people to? How do we encourage organisations to do more? To draw on more than just say the manufacturers. I know that there's always a cost aspect, but how do we call on individual organisations to try and increase their level of
the problem in any industry with trade bodies is they're very siloed. They have a very clear membership that doesn't look outside and are in most cases not very cooperative with each other. They tend to be, particularly if there's a fee involved in joining, they're very precious of their members and of sharing anything. That's not always the case, obviously, but it is in many cases. And I think that is an issue. It's funny. So I mean, there are umbrella organisations, but by the time you get up to the umbrella, it tends to be very vague. You know, and we're, you know, BIM4Housing. Are you just in housing, Matt, or do you run across the gamut?
Not in housing at all.
Okay, good.
We're involved in predominantly healthcare, commercial, commercial fit outs, the sort of education sector to some extent. High-rise resi we're involved in, but not really any housing projects.
Excellent. Well, that's good news actually to have. We're trying to spread just from BIM4Housing out, obviously with BIM and asset management, out to the whole gamut of the industry. Gareth.
It was more just to maybe give Matt some ideas. Obviously, you've worked within healthcare, Matt. Obviously, they've got HTMs throughout that specify certain things that can and can't be built within a hospital environment and things like that. The only way we're really going to be able to influence any sort of change is by coming up with this standardized approach. Now, whether that's a form of documents or whatever it may be, that's the only way we're going to get people to engage early and take on board why a deflection head is required, the necessity, whatever the instance may be. So this probably becomes that platform for us to try and influence. Everybody at the minute is in silos coming up with wonderful ways to improve things. If we can bring the whole industry together and say, let's just have a common sense approach to this. When Brunel designed and ultimately built most of the railway, he wasn't a chartered engineer. He was just very good at physics and geometry, and he understood things from that sense. So we need everybody to be part of this conversation, not just experts, but also people who see things differently. And we've got to break down the walls, the silos, people who are driving through change who really shouldn't be involved with driving through that change and are doing it for their own agenda, their own political gain, whatever it may be. So this is what hopefully this is the springboard for us to create a standardized approach to everything we're going to build, design, etc.
Absolutely. Okay, we've got 10-15 minutes left, but I'm not averse to finishing early if we feel we've finished. Has anyone got anything they want to add to that? I think we've got a plan for the next steps, as it were, which we'll get into the nitty-gritty of at the next meeting. Really breaking those our aims down into bite-sized chunks that we can manage. Has anyone got anything else they want to add, or any thoughts about anything really? No? Okay, well, let's leave it there until the next meeting, which will be in 6 to 8 weeks, I think. Well, if anybody wants to come along to the first Golden Thread Task Force meeting, that's on the 12th of June at 11 a.m. Put your name in the, or if you'd just like to be part of that, put your name in, just put it in the chat, Task Force, and we'll include you with that. Failing that, we'll send out the link to George's video with the high points and the video link, which will be likely beginning of next week, I think. Okay. Nothing else? Well, great to see you all, and really, really good meeting. Really good meeting. Thank you. See you next time.
It's video. Thanks, Richard.
Cheers.
Thanks all.
Thank you.